Welcome to Tentacles and Turtlenecks, where a former master of his dungeon, cast out by do-gooder adventurers, does the one thing left to him sure to torment heroes the multiverse over: teach you how to become a better dungeon master. Today we'll be covering what is possibly the most commonly asked about topic by both new and experienced dungeon masters alike, and a topic sure to make your group of heroes squirm: resources, pacing, and rests. Whether you're looking for better ways to challenge that group of adventurers, wondering how to handle wayward heroes bedding down for naps in the middle of enemy-infested territory, wondering why your party vaporizes every monster you send before them, or you're that friendly variety of dungeon master just wishing to give someone other than the wizard a moment in the spotlight, resources, pacing, and rests are your primary concerns. First, let's begin with resources. These are things like spell slots, hit points, hit dice, limited use features, and consumable items. The kinds of things pesky adventurers use to foil your plans. Your goal in plotting out any kind of adventure is to drain away those resources, and the tool of the trade to do so: encounters. But before we get into all that, let's talk about why you want to sap those resources in the first place. As any self-respecting dungeon end boss will tell you, there is nothing worse than a group of heroes busting through your front door with full resources. There's just no way to put up a good fight. If you want your boss battle to be compelling, to feel dangerous, to be memorable, to be something worth telling your future brain-infecting tadpoles about, you need that adventuring party to arrive in less than stellar shape. But there's more to just giving the villain its due. Regularly putting obstacles in the way of the adventurers that tax their resources creates tension. It makes the world feel just a little more threatening, makes those scarce resources feel all the more valuable. You will see those wizards, bards, and sorcerers of the group go from being overly confident masters of the universe to sweating uncontrollably as time goes on and they're forced to ration their spells. You'll also see classes with more short rest-dependent resources finally have their moment to shine, as the wizard panics that there won't be enough magic left to defeat their sworn enemy at the top of the tower. That fighter and warlock are just catching their second or third wind. It gives those heroes a chance to take the lead, which is good if you want to keep morale up long enough to lure everyone into your trap. When a band of full resource heroes goes into battle, those pesky sorcerers and wizards are notorious glory hogs, able to unleash their full power all at once with the power of an exploding star. It ends encounters too quickly, often in an unsatisfying way, and it steals all the excitement away from others, like that fighter or warlock, or, equally as importantly, from us. But when resources are scarce, suddenly the tables are turned. The epic battle lasts long enough to be a real danger, everyone involved gets more satisfaction out of the struggle, and the formerly sidelined heroes have their chance to shine. It's a win for everyone. So now that we're clear about why draining those resources creates better battles, more tension throughout the adventure, and helps close the gap between those spotlight-hogging wizards and inferiority-complex adult fighters, we come back to how to drain them: encounters. Now, sending wave after wave of bandits, owlbears, werewolves, and demons is certainly one way of doing things. Combat encounters are not the only way. An ancient tome known as the Dungeon Master's Guide suggests it takes between 6 and 8 encounters to properly tax a party's resources. And if you, as lord of your dungeon, try to pack 8 straight floors of your lair with nothing but monsters, you're bound to have a bad time when they come to collect their paychecks. Also, many groups of adventurers find that sort of thing tedious and boring, and they're bound to just head home without ever giving you the chance to meet them in battle, scramble their thoughts with your mind blast, and eat their brains. Basically, it's no fun for anyone. Instead, you should be sure to fill the path ahead of the heroes with all sorts of other obstacles. Difficult terrain to navigate, like cliffs, chasms, raging rivers, shabbily constructed bridges and stairs, severe weather, and maze-like landscapes. the kinds of things they can't just ignore. Or, of course, the classic trap-ridden dungeon with spikes, poison darts, pits full of vipers, massive rolling boulders triggered by pressure plates. Or just hold them up with some thinking by putting a few puzzles in their way. The goal of all these exploration-style encounters is really the same as combat, to sap the resources of the party, so each must be complex enough to warrant the use of spell slots or consumable items like scrolls or potions. Again, this may give certain adventurers an opportunity to shine by defeating these barriers to their progress through the use of skills rather than spells. Any obstacle should at least be complicated enough to justify needing several ability checks and the use of multiple skills to overcome, and failure on these checks should come at a cost. Most often loss of life and limb, or at least some hit points. The two approaches take opposite tracks. Using spells means a guaranteed loss of a resource, but a more likely chance of success with less danger. Using ability checks and skills means a chance to avoid spending any resources at all, but with a higher chance of failure, and with it a comparable resource loss if things don't go according to plan. These encounters set up opportunity for the group to negotiate how they approach things by working together. Are they willing to overcome it easily but risk not having enough spells left to face the enemies ahead? Or do they rely on the strength of the barbarian or cunning of the rogue to help conserve those precious spell slots? Again, we see how this creates a positive tension, encourages teamwork, and creates opportunities for everyone to contribute, lulling those foolish heroes into the false belief that the power of their friendship can overcome all the evil you have in store for them. Or perhaps you litter the area with social encounters. A poor lost child, an injured traveler, a bargain-making hag, a ghost in need of redemption, or even the monster that the town fears, but which is only even a threat because of the very town that fears it. Perhaps the adventurers now use a spell, or give a potion to whoever they meet, or equally importantly, perhaps they must choose between the urgency of their mission and the time lost to help. Lost time can apply to all sorts of encounters, combat, exploration, or social, and it's a resource you can tax as well as any. Time pressure is a powerful tool which we can use to impose a cost on resting, which we'll touch on, but suffice it to say that in addition to draining away hit points or spell slots, the ticking away of the clock is a powerful price to pay for your encounters. But, alternatives aside, there's simply no substitute for sending your minions in to rip apart your adversaries. It is important to realize, though, when sending monsters in to battle the heroes, that those monsters need to pose a meaningful threat. If the battle can be won with only a few strokes of the sword and a casting of only cantrips, it was a waste of everyone's time. Forget easy and medium combat encounters entirely. Hard is the new easy and deadly is your new medium. I admit this is going to vary wildly from group to group, party to party, but with a little practice and some trial and error, you'll eventually find the right balance to scare a few spells out of that wizard and have them begging to sit down to patch up with hit dice rather than marching on full steam ahead into your lair. But again, a word of caution. Don't send your greatest general in first. Well, that is, unless he's let you down one too many times and you really want to watch the heroes melt his face in a nova of fireballs and action surges. Not only will the battle be disappointing, but you'll have burnt through so many resources so quickly that the adventurers are going to surrender and head right back to town rather than continue onward. And when they come back, they'll be at full strength again. Wear them down piece by piece, and only then should you pounce. Alright, enough about what is in your encounters. How do you ensure you even have enough of them? Too few, and there's no tension and no threat. Too many, and the adventurers will turn tail and retreat. In either case, it's no fun for you. This all comes down to your pacing. You need to create the circumstances that push that party forward, rather than letting them take as much time as they need. You have a couple of tools for this. The classic is to just lock them in. Trap them somewhere dangerous where they can't simply stop and set up camp. The longer they stay, the more likely their demise. They have no choice but to press forward. Maybe the dungeon doors close behind them, or they're teleported to an unknown place. Or maybe they're just escaping your prison right now. Or try my favorite method, the time crunch. An event is happening whether the heroes get there in time to stop it or not. Maybe someone they care about is being executed. Rival treasure hunters are going to acquire that legendary treasure first. A dark ritual is being completed to summon some unspeakable evil. Maybe that villain they've been pursuing all this time is just ahead, but is escaping. Or that orc army is marching on the city right now. Or any other number of things you can imagine. The point is that the main characters of this story simply don't have the time to slack off and take a nap. If they take too long, they lose. With the time crunch, pacing becomes the building blocks of a dungeon anywhere in the world. Even a rush across the city, normally rife with safe places to rest and restock, is now dangerous and rest is limited, much in the same way as if the heroes were buried alive in some time-forgotten crypt full of monsters. Pacing also refers to how you lay out your encounters. Frankly, it's just more entertaining for everyone if you mix things up a bit. I like to fairly evenly split my encounters between combat, exploration, and socializing, so 2 to 3 of each. I also think it's best to mix and match. That is, don't run all 3 of your battles in a row or things start to get stale. You might also want to consider optional methods of controlling time, like the option in the Dungeon Master's Guide called Gritty Realism. Now to be sure, this is neither gritty nor realistic, but it does have the effect of stretching out the flow of time. A short rest becomes your 8-hour-long sleep, while a long rest becomes a full week of downtime. You can use this when the pace of your adventure is slower, such as one based around long-distance travel, or the rare combat encounter in an adventure full of intrigue. To be clear, when using this variant, you now need to pace out your 8 encounters over days and weeks, rather than trying to cram them all into a single day. And there needs to be plenty of downtime between adventures to recover. I don't recommend messing with time for your standard adventure. The consequences to causality are difficult to predict. But it is an excellent tool when the pacing of your story simply doesn't fit the standard expected pace. In any case, the idea with these kinds of strategies is that the adventurers are forced into pressing on through more and more encounters, spending more and more of their resources, all with little chance to stop and rest to recover them. Finally, it's important to realize the number of encounters is anything but set in stone. If you find your challenges are too much to handle, you can always use fewer. And if they're proving far too simple, use more. Changing the number of obstacles you put in front of the heroes is by far the easiest tool at your disposal. More difficult encounters can be exciting but also stressful, while many easier encounters might be more consistent and manageable, but also less interesting. You'll have to experiment to find the balance that works best for you. Which inevitably brings us to, as I said before, the most asked question from dungeon masters. How do you stop the party from taking rests when and wherever they please? Well, for starters, that good pacing will solve most of your troubles. If the party really wants to let their friend die, or the village be destroyed, or the villain escape, then so be it. They'll face the consequences of their inaction and hopefully learn from it. Though, in the spirit of fair play, it is a good idea to warn them a few times that time is running out. You want them to think you're a great villain after all, not some petty knockoff villain who can only win with cheap tricks. But what if you do have that strange group who think it's perfectly fine to set up tents inside the Lich's castle? Well, do what any good villain would do. Kill them! Yes, I know I just talked about fair play, but let's face it. Someone barges into your house, smashes up the place, kills your favorite pets, and then took a nap in your bed, you'd be pretty upset too. If they try to rest in enemy territory, do what any sensible villain/average homeowner would do, and bring down the full extent of your wrath on them for their hubris. There is no sleeping in dungeon crawling. Now, if they need an hour here or there to catch their breath and treat their wounds, those short rests, I think, should be encouraged. We went over the benefits to teamwork and spotlight sharing earlier. but be sure there are some safe places the party can take those short rests. If they seem reluctant to do so, I like to even remind them that they can when they reach such locations. Throughout that 6 to 8 encounter day, I expect my group of adventurers to take 1 or 2 short rests. But if they try to take a long rest where they shouldn't, then... Wait, what's that? An addendum to the most commonly asked question. What happens when the heroes set up a tiny hut and you can't even reach them? Well, that's ridiculous. Kill them anyway. Look, a long rest is 8 hours long. That's an eternity. Plenty of time to prepare their doom. Set up some fortifications, traps, even siege weapons. Bring in reinforcements so when they come out of that long rest they're forced through a gauntlet of those 8 encounters again, all in quick succession anyway. Don't let them cheat their way out of it, or force their hand. Make them come out early by threatening to bury the hut and them with it under a collapsing ceiling. Fill the room with poisonous gas, molten lava, a flood of water, or the undead. Summon some monsters who will terrify them just outside that thin skin of magic protecting them. Or, hey, just send in a spellcaster to dispel it. Bonus points if you fill the room with threats and then do so. Still can't get them out? Well, just don't let them rest. Keep up that all-night war drum and chant outside. Have the undead groaning and clawing at the surface, trying to reach that delicious hero flesh inside, or throw a goblin birthday party for all it matters. The dread and noise should be more than enough to keep them from getting any sleep, and if they can't rest, they don't get any of those resources back. And they might suffer some exhaustion to boot. And don't let cheeky enemies get the upper hand by thinking they can safely attack from within. They need to reach out of the bubble to fight, and that's plenty of opportunity to cut their hands off or fill their arms full of arrows. Some dungeon masters may encounter a certain type of rules-lawyering adventurer who might point out that ammunition such as arrows that were inside the hut to begin with should be able to freely be fired out without the archer needing to reach out into danger. To which I would say, those very same arrows can now be freely fired back in by the monsters. Also, certain people who have had a hand in creating the world in which all these adventures take place did once say that their intent was that things might be carried through or willingly move through it, but not necessarily fired out. So you're well within your rights to just be quiet and wait for your armies to mass outside the hut and kill them. In fact, magical hut or not, if you're happy to stick with the standard flow of time but still want to maintain that resource-sapping tension over long-distance travel, you'd be well within your powers as the arbiter of this world's rules to simply deny a proper rest anywhere that's not comfortable, safe, warm, dry, and peaceful enough. Stuck out in the middle of the wilderness, surrounded by unknown dangers and eerie sounds, worried your enemies are plotting against you and might be lurking just beyond view, trying to sleep in a lumpy bedroll on rocky ground. The wind is cold and the ants keep sneaking their way into your sleep sack to nibble on your toes. Yes, the magic of a tiny hut might mitigate some of those things, but not all of them. Good luck getting a proper long rest in those conditions. And realize that's basically the conditions everywhere except in that warm, cozy inn. Now, with all that, you may be wondering where and when they even can take long rests, and that's fair. My answer to that is only when they're actually safe. An inn in town, the temple of their patron deity, in the beds of their own home base that they built with their own hands, or yes, even the well-guarded campsite on occasion is acceptable. So long as they're not in a position to attract any dangerous attention, that is, and the threat of the time crunch isn't looming too near. It is important to give the adventurers time to rest and recover once in a while. If they're always running on empty, you'll quickly find you're out of heroes to antagonize, and, well, no dungeon master wants that. Alright, well, I think that about covers everything. Thank you for spending some time here in my Well, thanks for spending some time on my channel, since I don't have a lair to entertain you in anymore. I hope this was helpful and informative, so you can get out there and successfully bring pain to those pesky heroes before they kick you out of your dungeons. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like with the bartender at the front of the tavern, and if you'd like to hear more from this turtleneck-wearing Mind Flayer, subscribe and turn on notifications, or, even if you didn't like it, do it anyway. Did my mind control work? I think I'm getting a bit rusty being out of the dungeon for so long. And blasted saving throws.